Now, it's a truism, and probably an oversimplified one, that since the dawn of the scientific revolution, a wedge has been driven through the heart of our society such that the moral systems that we use to unite us, so those would be religious systems fundamentally, have been subject to an intense critique from the scientists. And it's a pretty effective critique. Even if you've maintained a traditional faith, it's like, the scientific onslaught is no joke. And that's a problem as far as I can tell, and the problem is that you're still left with the problem of how you should act. And Nietzsche, the philosopher Nietzsche, he would say that we're running on the fumes of Christianity in the West, because over its 1,000 years of domination, let's say 1,500 years of absolute domination, it produced a consensus of morality that was predicated on metaphysical presuppositions, and that organized societies, and those societies are predicated on certain beliefs, like the belief in, really I would say, that something divine inhabits each individual. That's sort of the presumption that's embedded in law. It's sort of the idea that underlies the idea of natural right. There's something about you that's so valuable that even the law has to bow to it, even if you're reprehensible, even if you're convicted and reprehensible. Now that's, man, the idea that people came up with that idea, that's a bloody miracle. It's, because generally speaking, your proclivity is, if someone's been even accused of doing something, the general human proclivity is that even if someone's just been accused of doing something terrible, that's enough so that you can stone them to death or do whatever you're going to do with them. Presumption of innocence before guilt, good God, of all the things that aren't automatic, that's got to top the list. It's unbelievable that that occurs. And it's interesting to me, because it seems to me that that presupposition that there's something valuable, transcendent about each individual, I wouldn't call that a scientific presupposition, but it seems to be a highly functional presupposition, right? I think, in that it isn't unreasonable to notice that societies that have valued the individual and made the law subject to the individual, even with regards to voting, because that's basically what voting does, it puts sovereignty in the hands of the people, those societies actually seem to work. Now, whether they'll work for the next 300 years, who the hell knows? I don't know, but they've worked pretty well for the last 500 years, let's say, and we've got it pretty good right now. And I suspect most of you are rather pleased that the law recognizes your value as individuals, and you take that for granted, right? You think you have rights, and of course the rights that you have, natural rights, are logical consequence of your transcendent value. And that's nested in, this is Nietzsche's observation, that's nested in a set of metaphysical beliefs. And his idea was that if you wipe out the metaphysical beliefs, eventually you wipe out the whole system, because you've knocked out the cornerstone. And it might take a long time for the thing to shake and fall, but it will. Now, whether he was right or not is hard to say. It looks to me like what's happened since Nietzsche announced the death of God in, say, the late 1800s, is that Western society has oscillated between extremes. Extremes on the right, Germany, extremes on the left, and with the democracies, at least the other democracies, the democracies managing to stay the course somewhere down the middle. But it's not obvious to me that that can be maintained without the underlying metaphysics. And that's a problem, because whatever you might say about the underlying metaphysics, it's not true the way science is true. And that could be okay, because there might be more than one form of truth. In fact, I think there is. I think there's pragmatic truth, and I think pragmatic truth is actually deeper than scientific truth. And pragmatic truth is the truths that enable you to act in a manner that best, that improves the probability, roughly speaking, of your existence and your reproduction maximally. That's a Darwinian idea. And one of the things about the Darwinian theory, this kind of puts it in opposition to scientific materialism, I would say, is that the Darwinian theory is that you don't have privileged knowledge of the world. And you can actually tell that because you die. Right? If you knew enough about the world, you wouldn't die, and you do die, and so you're an embodied theory of sorts, and that theory is good enough to get you along about 80 years and produce some reasonable probability that you'll have children and that they'll survive. That's it, man. That's what you've managed after 3 billion years of evolution. It's a good enough solution, it's a good enough way of acting, and we don't know a better way of acting, and our world conceptions are actually nested inside the Darwinian system, and they might be predicated on pragmatic truths rather than objective truths. Pragmatic truths are truths that have functional utility, and we're alive, we care about being alive, we tend to use our theories as tools. It's possible that our theories are tools, and that they're tools to help us stay alive. Now, I was reading a bit about Camille Paglia the other day, and I've noticed some similarities between, she's a famous gadfly, I would say, of feminists, of classic modern feminists, although she would regard herself as a feminist. She's unbelievably smart. Like, if you want to watch someone who's verbally, who has verbal mastery beyond belief, it's, you can watch Camille Paglia. She seems a little manic to me. She can wrap off an argument at a rate that's just mind-boggling, and it's very coherent, and you know, she tends to shred her opponents in arguments. She's so brilliant. She said something interesting, and she's been influenced by some of the same people that I've been influenced by. She liked this book by Erich Neumann called The Origins and History of Consciousness, which I would recommend if you're interested in Jungian theory, Carl Jung. It's a good introduction to Jungian theory, and it's about the development of consciousness. And it's predicated, like Jung's work and Joseph Campbell's work and Mircea Eliade's work, all of which has been criticized or ignored by the postmodernists, predicated on the idea that human beings have a central narrative, and that central narrative is the dramatic expression of the necessary human system of values, and that's built into us. It's part of our nature. We have a nature as human beings. We're not infinitely malleable by culture, which is a postmodernist claim, and a dangerous one. It's dangerous if we have a nature. Paglia has this idea that the reason that you come to university and you study the humanities, or the proper reason if you do that, is not to engage in premature and destructive criticism of something that you don't even yet understand, but to learn as much as you can about art and literature and poetry and drama and fiction and religious thinking. And this is all a kind of a, you can think about it as a, what is that? What is all that? It's art, you know, it's culture. Music belongs in that category. And like, what the hell, what about music? It's like everyone loves it, or almost everyone. It's a mystery. You listen to music and it's very meaningful. I mean, music gets people through some pretty dark times. Why? It's not obvious, that's for sure. You know, and in most cultures, music plays a very central role in identity formation, and you guys, I think you'll probably find as you age that your favorite music will be the music that you listen to between the ages of 16 and 20. It's kind of like it imprints on you, and it defines maybe that defines a generation, and maybe in our tribal past, and this is highly likely, when you were being inculcated into the tribal culture, that was inculcated with dance and with masks and with music all at the same time. So you're invited to participate in this drama and to take your place in this drama, and to think of that as a representation of the objective world is just not right. That isn't what it is. It's an invitation to a drama. Now then the question might be, well, is the drama real? And the answer to that is, it depends on what you mean by real. I think that great dramas are more real than real. They're hyper real. They're hyper real because they provide guidelines about how to act that are abstract and even perhaps generic, but applicable across an extraordinary broad range of situations.